In August of 1945, Japan had a fortress line in Manchuria that was built to survive the wrong war. 9 feet of reinforced concrete, gun rooms buried under hills, steel doors, tunnel systems, ammunition rooms, ventilation shafts, water wells, barracks, even hospitals sealed underground. Some positions were designed to keep fighting after the world above them had been smashed flat. Then the Red Army arrived with trucks. Not super heavy siege guns, not waves of bombers, not some secret tank built to crack concrete. Trucks. American built cargo trucks with steel launch rails bolted across their beds, stacked with 132 millimeter rockets. And when those rockets lifted off, they did not sound like artillery. They screamed. A long, tearing howl across the rain. Then hundreds of explosions landing almost together, so fast the human mind could not separate one blast from the next. The Japanese had spent years turning the Manchurian border into a wall. The Soviets brought a weapon that did its real work in less than 10 seconds. That was the terrible bargain of the Katyusha. It could not drill neatly through 9 feet of concrete. It did something worse. It erased everything outside the concrete and left the men inside blind. To understand why that mattered, you have to go back 4 years to a rail junction on the western edge of the Soviet Union. July 14th, 1941. Near Orsha, the German army was still advancing with the confidence of a force that believed the Soviet state was already cracking. A young Soviet officer, Captain Ivan Flerov, had 7 strange vehicles under his command. They looked like trucks that had been turned into church organs by a mad engineer. No cannon barrels, no recoil system, just bare metal rails loaded with rockets. The secrecy around them was extreme. The crews knew enough to fire them. They did not know enough to explain them. And Flerov had another order, darker than the first. If capture became likely, the launchers were to be destroyed before the Germans could study them. The weapon was not just new, it was a secret worth killing the machine for. When Flerov gave the order, the launchers emptied themselves in seconds. The German troops around the rail station had almost no warning. One moment the air was open above them. The next, the sky was full of flame trails, and the station vanished under a sudden blanket of high explosive. There was no visible gun line to answer, no slow ranging shots, no battery position calmly walking shells closer. Just trucks that appeared, fired, and disappeared. The Soviet troops eventually called the weapon Katyusha, after a song everyone knew. The Germans gave it a colder name, Stalin's organ, because the launcher rails looked like organ pipes, and because the sound made by the rockets did not feel human. The weapon's genius was not accuracy. A conventional artillery gun tries to put one shell on one point. It aims, fires, corrects, reloads, and fires again. The Katyusha was built around the opposite idea. One rocket was crude, many rockets were catastrophic. The standard M13 rocket was roughly 6 feet long, a 132 millimeter tube with a warhead carrying about 10 pounds of explosive. It could drift, it could scatter. Nobody pretended it was a sniper's weapon. But the Soviets were not asking one rocket to kill one target. They were asking dozens of rockets to make a whole piece of ground unusable. Inaccuracy, multiplied by volume, became a different form of precision. A BM-13 launcher carried 16 rockets. A small battery could empty its rails in 7 to 10 seconds. A full regiment could put a storm of explosive across a wide target zone before the enemy had time to understand where the firing was coming from. Then came the weakness. Once the rails were empty, the launcher was helpless. Reloading by hand took minutes, and minutes under counter battery fire could get a crew killed. So the doctrine became simple: hide the trucks, mass them quietly, fire everything, move. The Katyusha was not a fortress breaker in the old siege sense. It was a shock weapon. It did not ask the enemy to lose slowly. It made him lose time, nerve, hearing, direction, and the will to keep his head above the trench. On the Eastern Front, German soldiers learned that sound. Stalingrad heard it. Kursk heard it. Berlin heard it. By 1945, the rising howl of those rockets had become one of the signatures of Soviet offensive warfare. But after Germany fell, the rails were not silent for long. Joseph Stalin had promised the Allies that the Soviet Union would enter the war against Japan after Germany was defeated. Germany surrendered in May. By August, the Red Army was in position in the Far East. The target was Manchuria, and waiting there was the Kwantung Army. For years, the Kwantung Army had been treated as Japan's hard fist on the Asian mainland. It had prestige, history, and a reputation far larger than the force it had become by 1945. Behind it stood one of the most elaborate defensive belts in Asia. Beginning in the 1930s, Japanese engineers had carved fortified regions across the Manchurian frontier. Bunkers, galleries, firing slits, artillery chambers, infantry trenches, command posts, underground living spaces, hidden ammunition rooms. More than a line, it was a buried military world. At places like Hutto and Suifenha, concrete was poured into hillsides so thick that ordinary artillery looked almost insulting. Roofs and walls were built to endure punishment that would have flattened a field position in seconds. The defenders believed the border would buy them time, weeks, maybe more. Time for the rest of the army to concentrate. Time to draw the Soviets into a slower battle. Time for the fortress system to do what it had been built to do. But the Japanese fortresses had been designed around a prediction. They were built to defeat infantry attacks. They were built to defeat field guns. They were built to survive bombs falling one by one from the sky. They were not built for hundreds of rockets arriving in one breath. Across Siberia, the Soviet buildup had been moving in silence for months. Men and machines that had survived the war in Europe were loaded onto trains and sent east. Tanks, artillery, trucks, bridging equipment, ammunition, fuel, engineers, radio units, staff officers. By early August, more than 1 million Soviet troops were deployed for the offensive, backed by thousands of tanks and self-propelled guns and a huge weight of artillery. Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky oversaw the operation. From the west, Rodion Malinovsky's Transbaikal front would cross terrain the Japanese considered a natural shield. From the east, Kirill Meretskhov's first Far Eastern front would hit the fortified belt directly. From the north, Maxim Perkayev's second Far Eastern front would push down across the river systems. And mixed into those columns were the rocket regiments, not as a sideshow, not as battlefield theater, as a tool for breaking the spaces around the forts. The attack began just after midnight on August 9, 1945. The first ally of the Red Army was the weather. Heavy rain soaked the frontier. Visibility dropped. Roads turned ugly. Aircraft were grounded or blunted. And under that cover, Soviet infantry and reconnaissance groups moved forward before the Japanese defenders fully understood that the war had arrived. There was no long, polite artillery announcement everywhere along the line. In some sectors, Soviet assault troops reached wire, trenches, and outposts before the garrison had finished waking. But surprise did not make the concrete soft. At the fortified regions, the Japanese defenses did what they were built to do. Machine guns covered the approaches, guns fired from armored positions, trenches funneled attackers into pre-registered killing zones. The 1st Soviet Infantry, who tested those strong points, learned the old lesson quickly. Courage could carry a man to the wire. It could not make him bulletproof. Mud swallowed boots. Machine gun fire stitched the slopes. Firing slits kept blinking with muzzle flashes. The concrete core of the fort could sit there, almost indifferent, while men died trying to reach it. So the Soviets changed the problem. They did not need the Katyusha to punch through the heart of the fortress. They needed it to strip the fortress of its limbs. A fortified region was not one bunker. It was an organism. The concrete galleries were the bones. The trenches were the skin. The machine gun pits were the teeth. The communication trenches, wire, mortar positions, observation posts, and exposed infantry shelters were what let the whole thing see, bite, and breathe. Those outer positions were not 9 feet of reinforced concrete. They were earth, timber, sandbags, men, and that was where the rockets landed. In 7 to 10 seconds, a hillside could be turned from a defensive network into a field of torn soil and smoke. A machine gun nest did not need to be hit directly if every approach trench around it collapsed. A mortar team did not need to be seen if the whole reverse slope was beaten flat. An observer did not need to die cleanly if dust, concussion, and panic made him useless at the moment Soviet assault teams began moving. Inside the strongest bunkers, men might still be alive. That was the point. Alive, but cut off. Alive, but blinded. Alive, but with their outer defenses gone and their firing rhythm broken. And the psychological effect was almost as important as the physical one. A soldier can endure artillery when it comes in intervals. He counts the gaps. He waits for the next shell. The counting becomes a small form of control. The Katyusha took that away. There was no counting. There was only arrival. The air became one sustained, tearing sound. Then the ground answered all at once. Dust shook loose from concrete seams. Lights failed. Ventilation sucked in smoke. Men behind firing slits felt the shock pass through the walls and into their ribs. The fortress still existed, but the men inside it were no longer fighting the battle they had trained for. That was when the assault groups came forward. Engineers with satchel charges, flamethrower teams, infantry with grenades and submachine guns. Men who had learned in Stalingrad, Budapest, Königsberg, and Berlin that a bunker is not defeated from a distance if it refuses to die. It is defeated from the door. The rockets created the opening. The engineers used it. They crossed ground that had just been scoured by the salvo. They reached firing slits before the defenders could reform the outer screen. Explosives went against steel doors. Charges were pushed toward embrasures. Flamethrowers struck at apertures, not because fire could melt concrete, but because flame and pressure could turn the chamber behind a slit into a place no man could stay. Where the doors held, the attackers looked for vents. Where the vents were found, charges went down into the breathing system of the fort. The very tunnels built to keep the garrison alive became ways for death to enter. This was not clean. It was not elegant. It was siege warfare compressed into a moving campaign. Rocket salvo, assault team, bunker isolated, outer trench cleared, next hill, again and again and again. By the third day, The Japanese plan was already tearing in more than one direction. The border forts were supposed to work as a connected belt. Each position helped its neighbors. Each strong point bought time for command to react. The line was meant to slow the invader down until the deeper defense could form. But the Soviet offensive did not behave like the attack the Japanese had expected. The Eastern armies hammered the fortified zones. At the same time, Malinovsky's forces in the west crossed the desert and the greater Khingan Range, terrain the Japanese had treated like a wall on the map. Soviet tank columns forced their way through country that was supposed to stop mechanized armies. In places, they outran their fuel. In places, aircraft had to bring gasoline forward because the tanks had moved faster than the supply system could follow. That mattered because behind those mountains, there were no fortress belts waiting in depth. The strongest walls were at the border. And suddenly, Soviet armor was beyond the logic of the walls. For the Japanese defenders, the realization was crushing. The forts were not holding a front anymore. They were islands. The Kwantung Army tried to respond, but the reputation of the army and the condition of the army were no longer the same thing. Many experienced formations and weapons had already been pulled away for other fronts and for the defense of the home islands. Units left in Manchuria included reserve troops, older soldiers, raw conscripts, and men mobilized from settler communities. They were being hit by Soviet veterans who had spent 4 years learning how to break German defensive systems at scale. And whenever Japanese troops tried to form a hardpoint in the open, the rocket trucks made mass itself dangerous. A counterattack needs men to gather. A defensive line needs weapons to cluster. A command post needs vehicles, radios, runners, ammunition, and maps in one place. The Katyusha punished all of that. The same concentration that gave a unit weight also made it visible to the Red Army's fire plan. The trucks would halt. The crews would raise the rails. A battery commander would give the word. Then the sky came down, and another attempt to stop the advance disappeared into smoke. None of this means the Japanese soldiers did not fight. Many fought with extreme stubbornness. Some strong points resisted after they had been surrounded. Some garrisons refused to believe withdrawal orders, surrender broadcasts, or the evidence of their own isolation. The culture of surrender as disgrace did not vanish because the front collapsed. At fort after fort, men stayed inside positions that had already lost their purpose. They had concrete above them. They had ammunition beside them. They had orders, pride, fear, and nowhere useful to go. But bravery did not change the geometry of the battle. The Soviets had the tempo, they had the armor, they had the engineers, they had the artillery, and they had the rocket trucks to keep tearing the protective skin off each fortified point before the assault teams closed in. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. In Manchuria, the message did not end the fighting instantly. Orders moved slowly through shattered communication lines. Some units did not receive them. Some refused them. Some believed the Soviets were lying. The Kwantung Army's organized resistance began collapsing after August 16th, and across the wider campaign, the Red Army broke the major Japanese military position in Manchuria in a matter of days. A fortress system planned for a long defensive struggle had been overtaken by speed. But Hutto did not end with the announcement. At the fortress near the Ussuri River, some Japanese defenders continued to fight after Japan had surrendered. They believed the surrender message was a trick. Soviet forces even sent Japanese prisoners forward to call out the news. The holdouts killed the messengers. So the Red Army returned to the method it had used across the border zone: rockets and shells against the outer works, assault groups toward the doors, engineers toward the vents, flame against the slits, charges against the places where concrete had to breathe. The great fortress had been built to keep the enemy out. In the end, it also kept the garrison trapped inside. The fight at Hutto continued until late August. When it was over, only a small fraction of the defenders survived. The concrete had not failed in the way its builders feared. It had not split open like cheap stone. It had not been neatly pierced by a miracle shell. It had not been outclassed by a bigger fortress gun. It had simply been made irrelevant. Because a fortress is more than walls. It needs eyes. It needs nerves. It needs people outside the deepest rooms who can see, answer, move, and keep the battle connected. The Katyusha did not have to destroy the buried heart. It had to burn away everything that allowed that heart to fight. That is why the story is so brutal. Japan built permanence into the hills. Years of concrete, tunnels cut into rock, steel doors, guns hidden under earth. A defensive system meant to make time itself work for the defenders. The Soviets answered with a weapon that was temporary by design: a cheap rocket, a simple rail, a truck bed, a salvo lasting seconds. Then movement. The fortresses represented the old faith that a fixed wall, built thick enough, could force the enemy to pay in blood until he ran out of will. The Katyusha represented the new arithmetic of industrial war. Not one perfect shot, not one heroic duel between gun and bunker, but saturation, timing, mobility, and the refusal to let the defender recover. The Japanese had built shelters strong enough to survive bombs. The Red Army used rockets to take away the battlefield around them. And once the men outside the concrete were gone, the concrete stopped being a shield. It became a locked room. The walls remained. The army around them disappeared.